If you've lived in an environment and it's made you unwell, whether it was your home, school, or work environment, and then things aren't really changing for you, or if you live in a place that you're renting and you don't feel like you have enough rights where they're not remediating properly, this conversation shares what you should do to empower yourselves and to advocate for you to get well. It's not always the easiest conversation or process, but truly, it may be the thing that gets you to root cause healing. One thing I want to share before we move on to the interview is that I made a rookie mistake and I used the wrong mic. So I sound like I'm in this amazing wind tunnel. I apologize for the audio. We try to cut some of me speaking so that you get the crux of what Kristina is sharing. Hey guys, my name is Judy Cho and I'm board certified in holistic nutrition. And I have a private practice where we focus on root cause healing, and that often starts with the Carnivore Cure's all meat elimination diet. Today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Kristina Baehr. She is the founder of Just Well Law, and she has a legal team that works with people suffering from environmental injuries. We talk a lot about how mold illness or other things that happen in the environment have really impacted people's health, what you can do if you're renting and are not able to get the landlord to really help remediate or test the home to make it safe for you. We talk about the hard discussion that if you are living in a place that had mold or a lot of mold and you are getting sick from that particular home, what the difficult discussion that needs to be had in order to truly heal. Does it mean that you have to move? Does it mean that you have to remediate? We talk about a lot of sobering conversations about what it really means to suffer from mold illness or environmental illness and the steps and measures to take to get you healing. The goal, though, and the hope is that you can heal. Both Kristina and I have seen people heal, and so why we are advocating for healing, even if it's not the most easiest path. Let's get right into the interview. Hi, Kristina. I'm so glad to finally have you on my channel. I think we met at the first SIRSX back in Florida, and I heard you talking your story, and I really wanted you to come on to share your story. So if you could tell the people that may not have heard of you yet, your story, what got you into the law of environmental health.
I was poisoned in a house I was living in. I think that's true of so many of your listeners, right? You are not feeling well for a really long time. You start seeking answers. You go to doctor after doctor after doctor. And finally, I figured out that we were all in a house that was killing us. And we evacuated and we started building a case against the people that poisoned my family, which is the builder, the roofer, the designer, all the people who really cut corners, cut costs and cut corners. And we figured that there aren't very many lawyers out there that are doing this kind of work. And there are so many people who need help. So I hung out a shingle. I thought I'd take a case or two a year, just, keep busy myself, use my brain, help some other families. And I got 1,000 calls in the first 2 weeks that I was open because there is such a need. So I've been catching up ever since and helping as many people as we can.
So our practice works with a lot of people with chronic illness, and then they find out that they have SIRS or mold toxicity or mold illness. And then a lot of people may think of, should I pursue something legally? And then they don't know a lot about the law. So how do people know, whether it's from their school, work, or their home, that they're getting poisoned? Like, how do they know if they have a case? And then what are the steps? Should they document everything as they're going through their history? Any knowledge.
So document everything you can. If you think you have a case, just document. But we look at a few different things first to see if someone has a case. One is there third-party testing by a certified assessor? And by the way, I don't do just mold cases. I represent people in East Palestine, Ohio for that train derailment, which had to do with toxic soil, toxic air, toxic water. And then in Hawaii, I represent people with toxic water. So this is true no matter where you are or what you're dealing with, whether it's mold, water, or something else. Test and hire your own third-party tester. If you are in a house and you think that it's making you sick, do not ask your landlord to test. Your landlord will just hire an assessor who works for the landlord, who will come in and give the landlord the answer he wants, which is that there's nothing wrong there. So you need your own third-party assessment. And then, have you gone to a doctor? And if they're going to you, then they've already gone to a doctor, right? They're already getting medical help for their illness. But have you gone to get medical help, or are you willing to go get medical help? A lot of people are not, and that's okay, but they're not going to have a case for injury, right? I can't say you're injured if you haven't been to a doctor. Likewise, have you left your house, or are you willing to leave your house? I can't say that your house is uninhabitable if you're still there. So those are the three criteria that I look at: third-party assessment, are they willing to get medical care, and have they left, or are they going to leave their house? Now, for the last one, there are people in military housing who really can't leave, and that's a different discussion with them. But even then, I really encourage people to leave the houses that are making them sick, because that's the first thing that you can do to get better. You must get out of the environment.
Right. And then are there certain tests that you recommend that you've seen in cases where this type of environmental home test is more stronger of a case? And then also on the medical side, there's like urinary tests and there's blood tests. Are there specific tests that seem to help, make your life easier?
Any third-party assessor is going to do their job. So a visual inspection is important. Pictures, right? A picture can tell 1,000 words. And a little later on, I could share some of the pictures that we have from different cases, so you can really see what it looks like up close. But I had a case recently, and the opposing counsel said, you don't even have any pictures of mold. And I looked at him and I said, first of all, mold's invisible. But you're right. This is not my best case for that reason. I wish I had pictures of black stuff that I could show a jury. Fair point. That doesn't mean I'm not going to win the case. Doesn't mean that there wasn't mold there. But you're right. I'd rather have some pictures. So pictures tell 1,000 words. And then I always like to do testing in the HVAC, because a jury really understands that the HVAC is the lungs of the house. And if your HVAC is contaminated, your whole house is going to be contaminated. Now, Josh Rachel, who's an assessor who works with me a lot, does wall sampling. And I think that that's good too. Air sampling is good. You always want to make sure you have an outside control, but don't do your own tests. Your own ERMI test or your own. It's not that you shouldn't do them. Don't get me wrong, do them, but we can't rely on them. We really need a third-party assessor. Now, in terms of health and your body, my firm is called Just Well because I really just want people to be well. And I want people to go to medical practices where they are treated and they get well. And not every practice is right for everybody. So I just encourage people to go get the testing that their doctor recommends. And we will work with whatever that is. Some doctors, like Dr. Johnson in Texas, he really likes the urine mycotoxin tests, because what he's seen in his practice is he can give someone a urine mycotoxin test. He can treat them with hyperbarics. Those mycotoxin tests he'll do again. Sometimes they go way up because the hyperbarics is getting it out of your system. Then treat them with another round of hyperbarics, and then the mycotoxins go away. That's incredibly powerful stuff, both in terms of my own health and in terms of what I'm able to show to a jury. So sometimes urine mycotoxin tests are really helpful. Other doctors would rather not use them. Other doctors use inflammatory labs. And I do not call it SEERS. I call it systemic inflammation, right? Chronic systemic inflammation is a real thing. It's medically recognized. So doctors who are focusing on chronic systemic inflammation do labs that test for chronic systemic inflammation. I think that's very valuable. So I want to work with the doctors that are going to help my clients get well, and I'll work with whatever they give me, because they're going to be the ones explaining it to a jury.
In terms of your own journey, do you mind me asking, how did you heal? What was your process? Is it that you first felt better getting out of the home? Did you need treatment? What was your story?
Hey guys, just a really quick interruption. If you notice, we don't really run ads on this YouTube channel. And just being fully candid, instead of making money on external sponsors, we really wanted to share more about our functional medicine practice so that if you ever need it, you know that what we offer and what we can provide in terms of service and products. If you didn't know, our private practice has one-on-one sessions. We have packages. We do group calls with SIRS and with mind-body or nervous system regulation. And we also do a lot of functional tests. Some people do a complete wellness panel with us. So once a year, they get a detailed, comprehensive blood work to see how their health is doing. We also do functional tests such as stool tests to see if you have parasites or candida or H. pylori. We also do a lot of the Dutch urine as well as saliva tests to make sure that your hormones and thyroid is functioning well. Our flagship is our symptom burden, where we really trust the innate wisdom in our bodies. And so we are trying to see what symptoms do you have, because oftentimes a combination of symptoms is related to a specific system. We focus on gut health, where we try to get people's gut healing, because most of our immune system is in our gut. If you make your own body stronger, you will be a lot more resilient to everything that is in our toxic world. We believe in wellness for all, and not everyone can afford to work with us. So we provide a lot of free guides, free ebooks, free downloads, free tactical things to get you healing in your wellness journey. We also write comprehensive, detailed articles. For example, why a carnivore diet may have lower T3 markers, but may be in fact okay. I hope that the content I share is enough for you to get healing. But if the needle is not moving enough with a carnivore diet, with lifestyle changes, with mind-body work, if it's not moving enough when you are working alone, just know that we have the services to support you when and if that day comes. Because we are holistic health, we also have a prescriber. So if you are on thyroid medications or hormone medications, or you need medications for SIRS, we are able to walk you through the process. Our goal is to get you off most of your medications. All right, guys, thank you for being part of this community. Let's get back into the video.
My story is ongoing. And I think for lots of us, it's going to be a lifelong journey. I will say that when I was in that house, I had intense inner ear pain, and I had these migraines that wouldn't go away, and I had rashes and an overwhelming sense of kind of doom. I would wake up and feel like I'd been hit by a truck. And I knew something was wrong with me, but I didn't know what. And I went to doctor after doctor. And, I thought about going into oncoming traffic. These were thoughts that I'd never had before. And I went to a doctor named Dr. Picardo, Gabriella Picardo, and she ran a battery of tests. I mean, I think I said, give me every test. I had malaria when I lived in Africa. Is it still malaria? Is it West Nile disease from when I swam in the Nile? I mean, give me every test under the sun. And I got every test under the sun. And mycotoxins was just one of the tests that I was given. So for me, that test saved my life, because I got the score back and she said, go test your house. And I was like, test for what? I mean, I have 2 Ivy League degrees and my husband has 3. Neither one of us had ever heard of mycotoxins. I don't think we'd ever even heard the word. Now, there's a reason for that. There is a huge cover up in our country about toxic exposure, and there's a reason that you do not hear those words. But we were really ignorant, so we didn't know. And that's one reason I talk to, I'm so happy to be on this podcast. I will talk to anyone who will listen, because I want people to know how dangerous it is. And I didn't know. I didn't even know it was a possibility. Of all the tests that they gave me, my current home didn't even occur to me, right? It wasn't even on my radar. I was more interested in West Nile disease than I was in, could my home be making me sick? It didn't even occur to me. So we went and tested our house. We found it behind my daughter's wall. And the mold assessor said, I often find it behind the wall of the kid most affected. His name is Tim Taylor. Again, another person who saved my life. And he took an air sample right by her wall and found Stachybotrys. We opened the wall full of Stachybotrys because the roofer had not flashed the chimney. And he knew that he hadn't flashed the chimney. And he told the builder, he said, I didn't flash the chimney. And the builder said, that's okay, rig it. And so, that's intentional harm. That's clear intentional harm. But that's how it happened in our case. And we found that was the tip of the iceberg. But there's this other thing I want your listeners to know. In mold remediation, many people find it and they think that's it. And my husband would have been very happy that we hired a professional remediator, did all under containment. We cleaned Maddie's room. We're done. And I just had this mama intuition of, this is not all. I don't think this is it. And we hired an expert who did water testing around the house, found that it had not been flashed anywhere. And we found a humidity problem with the HVAC. Ultimately went to trial against that HVAC company and won. But I found that the two biggest defects in the roof were behind Maddie's wall and behind my son Scott's wall. And those are the two kids who have suffered the most from brain damage from their exposure. So it's real and it can really impact you. And by the time I left, I had a tumor that I had to have removed with surgery. I was really, really sick. And then my body kind of went into like the withdrawal when you move out, right? And so I started having heart palpitations, and I had POTS, and I was taken to the emergency room twice for collapsing. So it was a really, really scary time. And the number one thing I did was get out of that house. Get out of the house. It's making you sick. I had someone talk to me the other day, and he's telling me about his kid who's sick. And I was like, are you still there? And he said, yes. And you can't see it when you have the brain fog.
Right.
But you're telling me about how your kid is sick, and you're in the house that's making your kid sick. I just want that to sink in.
The pushback we'll get from a lot of our clients or patients is, well, I can't afford to move, or I'm in a contract and I have nowhere to go and I don't have the money. So what should I do? And I don't have a good answer for that.
My answer is, you can't afford to stay. Talk to my client, Brooke Pillman. She's dead. She was 31 and she stayed in the house I told her to leave. So you might think you can't afford to leave, but what if you can't afford to stay? And that's why I don't take those cases anymore, because my heart just broke when she died. And so now I don't even do a phone call unless someone is willing to leave or has left, because I just can't have that on my heart, right. And sometimes, I have had those conversations telling someone that they need to leave, or else I can't help them. I had a client who called and said, my kid's having an allergic reaction and the allergist thinks that it's from the house. And the allergist told me that I should leave or he might die. What do you think? Should I leave? I said, I want you to get off the phone with me and think about what you just said. And I'll talk to you when you're out of the house. Okay, I say all of that. And I want people to know that it doesn't have to be tomorrow. You have been exposed probably for a while, so you have time to make a plan. But sometimes you need to get out of the house to make that plan because your brain is so foggy right now. Get out of the house, make a plan. And it might not be tomorrow that you're able to leave. And that's okay, because it's really important that the next place you go be safe. So don't jump out of the fire into the frying pan. Or out of the frying pan into the fire. So do your testing, make a plan, get to a safe place, and do what you can to get out when you can. For a lot of my clients in Hawaii who were on a water source that was making them sick, some got out right away. The ones who got out right away, the government, who was the counsel in that case, the defensive counsel, because it was against the United States, they accused them of traumatizing their own family, right? Because they it was traumatic to leave. Well, they decided to leave. That was traumatic. And then for my client who stayed, they said, well, you caused the contamination by, you prolonged the exposure by staying. So you're damned if you do and damned if you don't from a legal standpoint. And I will defend people either way. But from a health perspective, don't traumatize your kids and make a plan to get out when you can.
So 2 questions that come up from what you just shared, and thank you for that. That was so poignant in what you shared. So one, we know that there is a lot of corruption in the building industry. And so, and we hear the numbers about most homes are water damaged, and especially commercial buildings. So one, where do we even go? Not everyone can move into a tent, especially if they have a family.
So that's hard. And when you figure that out, tell me. I mean, I think that's the age-old question. And my family's moved 4 times. So when you say, how are you doing? It's like, I'm on the journey, right? Because my kid and I are so sensitive that we're like allergic to the houses we try to live in Texas. So my current strategy is I bought the oldest house I could find because I realized the newer houses are the ones that are terrible. So I bought this house. Not everybody can afford to do that. I'm having it remediated by, a wonderful man. His name's Paul from Patriot, and he loves my family and he loves what I'm doing in the world. And so he's taking care of our house like that. It's just, he's incredible. Patriot Construction. But, not everybody can do that. And I want you to know I couldn't do that. It took me a long time to get there because no matter how much money you have, you lose it all trying to get well. Whether you have a lot or a little, like you lose it all. I mean, we were so broke that my father-in-law had to take out a loan on his house. Like we had borrowed all the money we could from our credit to the point where our family was then borrowing money so that we could just finish the house and move on and like pay our doctors. And it's just, it's a lot. So I have so much empathy for people who are trying to find a safe place. I will say though, that even as I've bounced around, my original house is what made us sick. And so I have been way better since I moved out of that house. I mean, that's how I know I have a flare, right? If I'm exposed because I was able to move out and get well. So you can learn the signs. You will know the signs. Your body will start to feel it. And so now now you are a canary. So you move in, I have clients who moved into a new place and there was a leak and the landlord didn't deal with it properly. Well, the gift is now they know. Now they know to tell the landlord they got to hire a remediator right away. They got to address the water damage. They can't put a fan on sewage water, just as an example, right? And so you know better, you do better. And that's all we can do because this has affected the rest of our life and how we live.
In terms of remediation, you mentioned that at your first house, you just had a gut instinct that that wasn't it. Since we've been in this space for a few years, we've noticed too, there are some people that they'll remediate and they feel a lot better. But there's a subset that just recently, someone in our group was sharing that they remediated and they just happened to pull a wall down that didn't test for much in that room, but they pulled the wall, I think it was a wallpaper, and there was all this mold. So now they have to go through the whole process again. At what point is it just that this house is too contaminated for somebody that's chronically ill?
And I have to say that this is why I do what I do. People need money to get well, right? And I can't get the money right away. It's not like you hire me and I get you $1 million tomorrow. And often the cases aren't worth $1 million. I want to be really clear about that. It's not like you hire a lawyer and you get $1 million. That's not how it works. It usually takes a couple of years and then it may only be a few $100,000, right? Depends on the circumstances. But whether I can get them $1 million, which I have, or a couple $100,000, which I have, they can use that to then, every one of my clients who has settled a case has used it to go get well. They've used it on housing or health or both. I will never forget my client who sent me the pictures of the air purifier she bought the minute she got her check, right? So when you're in a house that's making you sick, I think one question is, how is it constructed? Because if you find some basic construction defects, you're probably going to have more, because they probably cut corners elsewhere too. And that's, you're going to find the same or similar problems elsewhere. I've also heard that it's really hard to get well in the house that made you sick. I will leave that to you. To your professional opinion, I don't know. And look, there's a psychological component. And I know that. But I will tell you that it's also real, because once you have been exposed, the scientific literature says that they show this in mice, your cytokine storm, which is the inflammatory response, happens faster when you're exposed a second time or a third time. That's what they showed in mice. For the first time, it took a long time. The second time, it happened immediately. So it's not a trauma response when you get exposed again and you're suddenly like freaking out. It's actually a physiological response. And it's a trauma response. And when you look at it, it's both. And when you look at it in the brain, you see, our experts describe a double brain injury, because you can see the physiological impact of the toxic exposure. And this is true no matter what exposure it is, by the way. It could be gasoline, it could be jet fuel, it could be vinyl chloride. But the toxin affects your brain. And then the exposure and the trauma of losing your house and being poisoned in the one place you were supposed to feel safe. Maybe it's a school dorm. Maybe it was your freshman year. The trauma has its own physiological impact on the brain. So you end up having a double brain injury.
Yeah, we've definitely noticed that in our practice. So we'll see people get that quicker, sicker effect. And it's because your immune system has now recognized and remembers how it got sick and what to do or what it wasn't able to do. And then we also see this constant fear now of anyone going anywhere and then thinking, oh no, I have the symptom of getting exposed to mold, or this place smells musty, or this place, I just don't feel well. And then they start really impacting the nervous system to overly react, that we have to start doing nervous system regulation. So I do see both impacts. It completely makes sense. If you are renting, because the biggest thing I hear from our population is that if they're a renter, there's not much I could do because the landlord's not really doing much. Mm-hmm. But I think that there's always something you can do.
One is make your home as safe as possible, right?
What is that?
But I have to tell you, I have a client who made her home safe by opening the windows, and her 3-year-old fell out the window.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so like within reason, at some point you got to just move. But get high-level air purifiers in your space. Reduce your overall toxic burden. Don't clean with bleach, right? Like, what are the other things that you're exposing your body to? Clean up your diet, go gluten-free or dairy-free or whatever you're going to do to get, reduce your overall toxic load. So there are things that you can do, even if you're in an apartment that has some exposure. Look, I've taken third-party testing, and I've told the landlord, I can either give you the results or you can let me out of your lease. Which do you prefer? And often they'll just let me out of the lease, right? Because they don't actually want to know. They don't want my results. And even if they had my results, they're not going to give it to the next person. So it's not like I don't feel like I'm making somebody else sick by doing that. I'm just getting out of my lease. And when you reach out, if you ever are in that situation, feel free to reach out to us. We have lawyers now in every state. We have something called the Safe Housing Collaborative, where we're raising up lawyers in every state and empowering them to take these cases and showing them how to do it and giving them the resources and the experts and everything that they need to succeed. And we feel really passionately that we should be taking more of these cases around the country, because show me the incentives and we'll show you the outcomes. And these landlords right now have the incentive of making people sick. And we, in litigation, can change that incentive. We can bring enough cases where they're better off not making people sick, right? They're better off actually addressing mold when it's called out. And if we bring enough cases, either in the aggregate or big verdicts, we're going to show them that if you don't take care of people, you will have to pay the consequences of that. And that changes the incentives and makes it safer for everybody. Bear in mind a company like Greystar, right? Greystar has a policy not to talk about mold.
Okay.
Well, think about that. So same is true of Balfour Beatty in Florida, this other huge case I have. They don't use the word mold. Okay. Well, if you don't use the word mold, then you never have to recognize that anything is mold. If you don't recognize that anything's mold, then you never have to call a certified mold remediator. You also never have to hire a certified mold assessor. So as a result, mold proliferates. So mold is going to proliferate in those buildings that belong to those companies because of the policies they have. Now, when you expose that, even you and I talking right now, I said them by name, Greystar, Balfour Beatty. You know why? I want those companies to change their policies. I want them to, I'm going to proclaim it here. I'm going to claim it to CBS and NBC and anyone who will listen to me. And when I file my cases, I say that in the publication. And so when we call it out, and then when we bring them to trial and win, or we bring cases and they settle and they have to pay for it. And when I get them at deposition, I say, now let's get this straight, what I just said, right? Well, if you don't use the word, then you don't have to hire a mold assessor. And then it could just proliferate, right? You can just get away with it with impunity. Even the depositions bring awareness and bring accountability because someone has to say under oath why they do that. What is the purpose of a policy that prohibits the employees from using the word mold? Is that good for the health of your tenants? Would you want your kids to be in that apartment? And I always ask about the kids, like whether they're older or younger, because sometimes they have college age. And so I can talk about dorms. And sometimes they have younger kids and I can talk about my own daughter. What if it was your kid's wall? Would you hire a certified remediator? Or would you just hire a painter, which is what a lot of them do? So I believe that the justice system is entrusted with enforcing the safety rules. And there's a movement of people around this country who are rising up and bringing the claims. And they're bringing the claims so that the justice system can do its job, so that we can call these things, bring these things to light, and bring accountability and justice. And when someone who is negligent has to pay for it, they pay attention. So one of the things we talk to juries about is what is the amount of the dollar amount that's going to make them pay attention? It has to be enough. It has to be just and appropriately compensate the victim. But the law has two purposes. One, to compensate the victim, and the other is to deter and prevent bad conduct. So every verdict must do both of those things. And you can't have one without the other. And it has to be enough.
One of the things or issues we run into is that a lot of people will say, because they've been sort of, I'll use the word indoctrinated, but they've been, taught growing up that unless it's black mold, it's not bad, right? So if you don't see it, it's not a big issue. And then I think a lot of the law, I think there was a study with rodents about exposing them to a lot of mold in a short amount of time. And like, look, they didn't really get sick. So then they wrote a lot of the law with that. And so some people, like some landlords or builders, can say, hey, I'm following that. And it says mold is pretty safe. And if you look up studies, there's this one, I think he's the editor in one of the publications, but he writes all of this sensational studies where it says mold and this fantasy and this unicorn illness, and it doesn't have, and maybe some lung issues, and that's the extent.
Yeah.
So when people cite that, would the people that believe in all those studies, are they still negligent? And then secondly, how do we change the public opinion of, no, there's mold everywhere, it's impossible, so mold cannot be my thing?
That is a great question. because I had one of those guys in my case last week. His name's Bruce Kelman. And I looked him up on AI, and in a minute, I saw that he wrote the ACOM paper that has been cited in every freaking litigation case since 2002. But it was withdrawn by ACOM in 2015 because for so many reasons. But the Manhattan Institute paid him to write it for the Chamber of Commerce. So he took his academic BS and he put it into plain English and then distributed it to industry. So and he used the words junk science.
Right.
And lo and behold, in our cases, we see in the precedent those words, junk science. So how do we change people's mind? The NIH now says that this causes cognitive harm. The Navy was distributing this NIH 2-pager to everybody at a town hall in Florida. I was blown away. I was like, wow, okay, well, now the Navy's pointing to the NIH. Great. Now we've got two agencies saying that this is bad. And so the science is just caught up. And when I get in front of a judge, I'm able to say, I recognize, Judge, that there was an era when this was just junk science. There was also an era when we thought smoking was okay. And the science changed. And there were experts just like this guy in courts all over America who said that smoking was okay. And that anyone who said it wasn't was just pandering in junk science. But that's what's happened here. The science is caught up. And I have hope in American juries because every focus group that I do, and I do a lot of them, we do them on Zoom and we get people from all over the country. And I talk to them and I say, how many of you believe that mold causes cognitive harm? They all raise their hands. Last week, I asked that question of 100 people at a jury, at an actual jury, picking an actual jury. 100 people. How many of you think that mold causes cognitive harm? Everybody raised their hand with the exception of 3 or 4. So I asked those people, well, tell me more. What makes you say not, or do you not know? Every one of those people said, oh, I just don't know. That's amazing. I mean, the American people know what this does to your body. Thank you, Lord. It took a long time. CNBC, when they did a story on my family, which is why I got those 1,000 calls, by the way, but they did this story on my family, and they didn't want to write about the cognitive harm until I gave them my expert and I said, please don't make this story about asthma. This is not about asthma. I don't have asthma, right? Please don't make this about asthma. And so I connected them to Dr. Jamie Lichtenstein in New Haven, and they did a whole conversation with her, and then they wrote about the cognitive harm. But it was a fight, right? I had to get there. Whereas Women's Health did a study this year, included my story, all about cognitive harm without needing to do that extra mile because it's now medically accepted. It's now universally accepted. And I would say that the people who say it's not, they're the ones who are peddling in junk science. They're the ones who are ignoring the medical literature.
But what about the nuance of, well, yeah, I know that black mold that you can see on the wall, that will cause cognitive, but if I don't see anything, right, maybe a little stain, maybe a little warping, but not really anything. There's no way that mold or that level of, must, or mildew, that's not going to cause the cognitive. I mean, do you think that part has caught it?
So that's a great question. I'll have to test that more. And that was absolutely what this opposing counsel said last week. But here's the thing. He stood up, this opposing counsel gave an opening statement in Houston. And he said, mold is everywhere. This is Houston. Mold is everywhere. And it really, unless it's in extreme quantities, really isn't all that harmful. And he actually compared my expert and probably myself to those lemon busters who used to come and check out cars and see if they were lemons, and they always found it was a lemon because that incentivized them to make more money somehow. I will tell you, the jury did not like that. They did not like that because this idea that mold is just everywhere is not. don't minimize it. It's very dangerous. You can say it's not there. You can say it's not there in enough quantities. You can have a scientific analysis, but to say it's everywhere and not that harmful was very offensive. So I really, I appreciated the state of the American jury on that. But you're going to have testing to show that it is bad, right? And you can't necessarily have pictures of it in the wall. A lot of times it's white.
Right.
But if you have test results that show that aspergillus is in extreme amounts, then you're going to be able to prove that case. But I also really like taking pictures from the HVAC. And there's almost always, in cases where people got sick. I'm not saying that there's mold in every HVAC, but when people are getting sick, it's often clear in the HVAC. Now it's usually it may be coming from some defect somewhere else, but it got into the HVAC. And so you're able to show pictures. I think pictures are very important.
What I love to use just common sense and just logic. And if we understand the role of mold and fungus, it's to basically, anything that it will maybe decay things that have the opportunity to decay, and then it'll bring it back to the ground so that new life can form. And so if we understand that fact of mold, then we know that any amount is not good for us because it's going to look for your Achilles heel in your body, where that's why mold also looks very different. And there's so many different symptoms. So your story may look different than someone else that always has chronic joint pain. And it's because I really believe that the way that the fungus works is it finds where you are the weakest in your body and attacks that very thing. And so then people think, oh, it's hormones, or no, I just have rheumatoid arthritis, but it's really a lot of times it's that chronic inflammation from the exposure to mold. And it depends on the person on how sensitive they are. And I don't think we think enough about how the environment is impacting us adversely.
I could not agree more. I've been to a lot of doctors. I've been to wonderful doctors. I've been to integrative health doctors, right? And they told me that I was stressed and I have 4 children and I should reduce stress in my life. And so I was a big firm lawyer working on really complicated big cases. And I left that job and I took a government job. And I loved my government job too, don't get me wrong. It was a wonderful place to work. But I was gluten-free and sugar-free and dairy-free and exercising, and I had every other Friday off. And I got worse. And it was only Dr. Picardo who had this tool in her arsenal. So one of the reasons I like to speak so much is I want doctors to know. I want them to have it in their arsenal.
No, I think that's really good. I think that the more that we are sharing, more people are learning about it. But it always goes back to the home, because so many people say this is the number one thing I get whenever I share this on a podcast, anything related to mold is this is a rich man's disease. I can't get better from what you are sharing. And so they'll just go on protocols, elimination diets, supplements, and that's the best that they can do, when I think so much of the healing can happen by getting out of the environment.
Well, how much are they spending on all of that?
Yeah.
Right? How much are they spending on all of that? And the thing that I would say is, I thought I was never going to work again, or at least at a high level. I thought I was never going to work on a case worth hundreds of millions of dollars again. It's something that I did when I was smart, and then I got unsmart because of my exposure, and I'd never do that again. And I didn't think I'd have the energy for it either. And I had to leave my government job because I really couldn't handle it. I was sick, and it was 40 hours a week, and I couldn't do it. And I'm working more than 40 hours a week now, and I'm working on cases that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. How did I get back here? Taking care of my health. That was the number one investment in my financial future. So it meant going broke, right? Like I went broke first. Don't get me wrong. We lost everything, but I earned back my earning capacity. And I also developed this superpower that's sad. I call it a sad superpower, because now I can come into a community of people. I'm a community safety lawyer. Communities call me when they're sick, and I can come in and help them rise up against the institutions that made them sick. And that is a beautiful honor and a privilege. and it's not something that I ever had before. So that is absolutely part of it. And I recognize that I'm dumber, and being dumber actually means that I can communicate better because I use regular language. I speak the way everyone speaks. Sometimes I skip a word or have I say or I can't think of something, or you know what, that's how a lot of people speak. And so I'm just 100% myself, and that resonates with people in a different way now. But my point is, if you can't work, you can't make any money for your family. So don't dismiss this as a rich person's disease. If you want to be economically well and financially stable, then you need to address your health so that you can work for your family. Because I know what it is like to not be able to work for your family, and it really sucks. So invest, get out of the bad environment so that you can rebuild your health, so that you can rebuild your financial life. And yeah, that's going to take a financial hit to get out of the environment. Go stay with a friend. Go stay with family. Live in their single room. Get an extra job. Like, I know that you have listeners who are, dismissing that as they can't do that. But I also want to tell you, yes, you can. Yes, you can. I have clients who put up a tent in their backyard, and you know what? They got better. And they were then able to move.
Right.
And they were able to move out of that environment and get to a safer place. And now they're taking care of their family financially. And it took a tent.
It's interesting, but I feel that the population I work with, they're either suffering from maybe chronic Lyme, and it could also be that chronic mold is impacting. So any amounts of mold now are exacerbating the Lyme to not heal. But because of the mold and because it affects your neurological, you start getting into this negative spin of I can't afford it, I can't go out. And I see a different group of people in our practice where you have the fighters that are like, thankfully I have an answer. Hallelujah, I'm willing to do anything. Just tell me what to do. And they're up and ready to go. And then there's the other subset where they are like, no, I'm not going to go down that path. But they have so many different symptoms, or they're so deathly sad now that they have this, new diagnosis that they never wanted. And you see then the trajectory of their healing process, the people that are fighters from day one, that are committed to, if I lived in a big house, I'm willing to go super small and change my perspective of life and live a life that I'm going to have health. And maybe I don't get to have the big house that has the more bathrooms and the riskier risk of having mold. They end up healing tremendously. So if we're like, do mind body work, do this, they're like, I'm all in. All I care is that I get my health back. And then there's the other people that are like, well, I can't get out of mold now, but I'll just be on a binder forever, or I'll just do this. And so that you hear all of these temporary band-aids, and they never yes, they might feel a little better since they're on a binder, since they're on some type of glutathione or, something to help detox the body, but they get stuck. And then they spend their wheels for years wasting money, essentially. And so it's just, I think what you said is dead on. Yes, I know it's a lot of money. That is a true statement. Yes, there's a chance you're going to go into another place that's not going to be fully good. I mean, you just shared, you went to 4 different houses, but you could still get your health back. And then when you have that, then you can actually have a fight.
Look, I have to tell you, I was at a mindset conference this year, and I don't think my current rental is great. It's not. It's not a perfectly safe house. And they asked you, what is the one thing you want? And I started crying. All I want is a safe house. Okay. If all you want is a safe house for your family, and for anybody, it can be anything, right? Other people have other reasons. Why do you want that? Well, I want my family to be healthy. Well, why don't you have it yet? Well, because I can't afford it, because we're going to wait till we get this big case in, and then we're going to build. And okay, and why not now? Maybe you can borrow against that big case. Like what would it take to get from here to there? And then all of a sudden I see the world in a different way, and now I'm hiring an assessor to go with me to 5 different houses. Maybe I don't need to like build a house from the ground up with exactly the right experts at exactly the right place. Maybe I can find a house that's safe enough and make it a little bit safer and move in with my family. It's just so I'm not immune to those excuses, right? I had excuses just now in my own life, but I've been able to break out of that because there are so many possibilities. I have that big case, so I could borrow money against that big case and put money on as a down payment on this old house that I think is going to be safest for my family. And now Evan's like, my husband Evan is working on that house and is, often kind of depressed about like, we had this problem or that problem or whatever. I'm just like thrilled. I cannot wait to move in. It's going to take a little while. I know now we have to get a permit on this other thing. It's going to take time, but I'm like, I am on, there's great joy in being on your way to recovery, right? In doing the things, in moving the right direction. I'm in a relatively safe house right now. It's not the worst, but it's not the best. And I'm going to move to a safer place. So that's all just to say that I have tremendous empathy for the people who are in their head and they don't think of all the possibilities. And sometimes all you can do is take the next best step and take, the next 5 minutes. And I will never forget sitting with a friend and I was crying because my house was contaminated and I knew it was contaminated. And I had 4 kids, 2 of whom were really challenged at the time. Like I could not just go to someone else's house with 2 brain damaged kids, okay, of 4. It was in the middle of COVID. Where was I going to go? I had nowhere to go. And my house was contaminated and I thought it was even more contaminated. And I didn't feel good. And she was like, well, maybe you should leave your house. I mean, she gave me the keys to her house, and I was able to. The next day, my kids and I got out of the house, and I had to tell my husband, like, I'm leaving, and you can come if you want to, because he thought we were fine, But it's everyone has their own journey of how to get out and how to move to the next safer place. And sometimes you need a friend or someone who's seeing a little bit more clear, or a doctor or a health professional like you who's seeing a little bit more clearly to say, now think about what you just said.
A lot of times the female is the one that gets sick because they're in the home a lot and the husband's working or the significant other. And so then they're not as sick. And so we have couples that argue because
Oh, yeah.
if I was the sick person and I'm like, I want out of the house because I know it's making me and my children sick, but the husband isn't, or whoever the other person isn't fully on board and they're the ones bringing in the money, how do we deal with that?
Well, the trickiest thing you said is they're the ones bringing in the money.
Yeah.
But even in my own case at that moment, that was true. Like my husband was bringing in the money, but I am a mom. My kids' well-being, yes, belongs to my husband too, but it belongs to me. I am responsible. So I was going to get out with my kids come hell or high water. Once I made that decision, right? Don't get me wrong. It took me, like I just told you, my thought process was not immediate. But once I made that decision, I was going to, a light bulb went off and it was clear to me that I had to get out and I had to get out right then. But that's why I say you can take your time, because I did not take my time. I basically told my husband, you can come or not. I am leaving. I took a laundry basket for each kid with a stuffed animal and a blanket that I washed in that ECV stuff. And that's what we took with us. And I picked them up at a birthday party and I took them to this house and I said, we're going to fix our house and then we're going to move back into our house when it's fixed, but it's going to be fixed. We never moved back in. because it took 2 years to fix. We found more and more problems, and by then we were out of money. So, you know, we that was a really I added a lot of trauma to that experience that I didn't necessarily need to have. But I don't regret that is making the decision myself and taking action, because I'm responsible for myself and my children. And I'm not going to let anybody else, like, as much as I love my husband, I'm not going to let him put my kids in danger in the house we're living in.
Right. It's interesting what you're saying with everything you've shared. Actually, I always, whenever we work with a patient or client and their hurts me two scores pretty bad, we obviously say work with an IEP, but sometimes we feel in our gut instinct like your house is probably not salvageable. But to say that to a client or patient, it feels like such a hard thing to share. And so sometimes we'll skirt around it and say, yeah, why don't you work with your IEP and hopefully the IEP will say something. But I think what I hear from you and what I'm taking away from this conversation myself actually is that I'm doing them a disservice by saying they should stay there, because they can actually be getting worse and then it just takes longer for them to heal. And I think so I'm very faith-based, and I think this whole journey with mold, I know it's hard, but then you start focusing on what really matters, right? So you can have the big house, the big career, the big whatever, but at the end of the day, we will all die one day. And what really matters is the people you love, or you having your health so you can even enjoy the people you love. And so it's a very humbling experience going through this process. And I mean, even in the Bible or for wherever, it shares that, if a priest comes and the mildew is not gone, then at a certain point you have to burn the house down or burn the place you're living down. It shares what may happen with a home. And I think it is hard. It is hard to say you have to pick up from where you are and go. But I mean, I think for some people, they really need to. And it sounds like you and your family did too.
Well, I mean, that gives me goosebumps, because it's laid out in the Bible. And the first time I saw that, I was just so blown away at how accurate it is, right? First you clean it, first you remediate it, and then you see if it comes back. So, if you're working with someone who is faith-based, you can show them that. Sometimes I will have the conversation with the spouse and, kind of just point to the data, because really it's just about data. It's what does the data say about your house, and where is the mold? If it's just the HVAC needs to be replaced, okay. But has it spread to every wall? And that's kind of where it becomes trickier. Look, there are military families in Key West who are stuck in these houses that are the worst houses I've ever seen. And I told 2 of them that they had to go right away. One was because there was water coming out of the socket, and Balfour Beatty told them to leave the socket cover off so that it could dry out. This girl had a toddler. Like, that's not safe. You got to get out right now. Because if there's a fire there, I'm going to feel like it's on me, right? So I told her to leave. And then there was another circumstance where some kids were sick, and I really said, you need to get out. But for others, it's kind of like they don't feel like they can go anywhere and they can't afford someplace else. So I always try to take the long-term plan. What's your strategy to get to safety? It doesn't have to be today, but when are you going to be able to leave? And when I ask the question that way, I think it has a gentler, like, more encouraging feel to it than you got to get out right now. But I'm telling you, like, that you got to get out right now, it's empowering, because they know that inside. So you're just telling them what they already know, and you're giving them the power and the strength to go do that. So I've done it both ways.
I've also used the bridge of, why don't you just stay in a tent for a week or go to a hotel that's relatively new? If you feel better, it could be an indication that the home that you're staying in right now is not as good. I wanted to ask you really quickly about your Hawaii, your legal battle there. And I know it's a lot about the water. So that to me then makes me think, how do we know if all the other places the water is safe. And what are your thoughts around that?
Well, in Hawaii, there was a particular spill, and there was a fuel release. Spill is release, but there's a fuel release that was next to a well, and the fuel went into the well that went directly to the drinking source for 93,000 people. Now, there had been other spills over the years that had also contaminated that water. So the water was already contaminated. The soil was already contaminated because there had been many, many, many leaks from this particular facility. And after it went into the drinking water, and this is important for people to hear, the Navy said, there is no indication the water is not safe. Be very cautious. Your ears should perk up if you hear that language. There is no indication. Well, what does that mean? That actually just means that they haven't taken the test. But if the water smells like fuel, whenever I got anyone from the government to deposition, they all admitted that, yes, if it smells like fuel, it's an indication. And they admit that at the time it was smelling like fuel. So what they said, there's no indication, is not true. It was a lie. They lied to 93,000 people. And then the government had the audacity to stand up in trial and to say that there was not enough fuel in the water to make anyone sick. Even though the government's own data showed that 3,000 people, or actually in the end, 7,000 people had medical encounters for acute poisoning symptoms. I said it's denying a historic event. That is what that is. But that is the defense. And look, those lawyers are doing their job. But that's a defense I would not have taken if I were them.
Right.
But the defense in every one of these cases is there's not enough X to make you sick. So follow the logic with me. If there's not enough X to make someone sick, and that person thinks that they're sick because of X, then that person is psychosomatic or crazy. And the Navy's experts stood on the stand and said that. It was stress-induced. And I said, what caused the stress? But besides that, I mean, like the baby's welts were stress-induced, right? Like the dog's vomiting, was that stress-induced? I mean, it was, I welcome the defense lawyers to make that argument. I was so offended at the time because these are my clients, and for them to be called them crazy, I just really didn't like it. But now in retrospect, I'm so glad they had that argument because it's not a good argument, right? But it is the argument that they make in every exposure case. There's not enough X to make you sick. Therefore, Kristina Baehr is crazy, right? That was the defense in my case. I was crazy because I was just a stressed out mom during COVID. And
Yeah, we get a lot of that in our clientele where they've been on some type of psychiatric medication because eventually it's all in your head.
Yeah.
You need to go and get some meds, or they've been diagnosed with bipolar or major depression or anxiety, and it's just something of that nature. And it's not actually that their home or wherever they're staying is making them sick. Thank you so much for your time. This has been amazing, and it's really shed a light on just the way I practice and the recommendations I give as well. So I think it is important to really, focus on the environment, especially from what they're sharing with us. And sometimes we do a dance, and I think that's actually doing a disservice to them. So I humbly am very appreciative of what you shared, even for me today. So thank you. Where can people find you? And if they wanted to work with you, how would they go about doing that?
Our firm is called Just Well Law. On Instagram, we're Just Well Law. So follow us on Instagram. That's where we're giving announcements about our cases, where you'll see me in the environment, pointing out the bad stuff, calling out the bad guys. Cheer us on there. We need the encouragement. Or go to our website and submit a claim there and start the conversation. But I have a message for you if you are listening and you're in a house that is making you sick. My message is take care of yourself and your family and get out if you can, when you can. And my prayer for you is that you will get well enough to help others. You may feel right now that you're never going to get well enough, that you're never going to be better. And I felt that way. But it is a tremendous privilege that I have now to turn around and help others. And my prayer for you is just that you will get well enough.
Yeah, I totally can resonate with that in my own health journey. So thank you so much. This has been such a powerful conversation, and I hope it does give people some perspective and then the hope for change, because we do see people get better. It is a journey. I think it's a message that needs to be known, because so many people live with mold and they think it's normal. So thank you so much again, and thank you for everything that you do. I mean, your advocacy is really making leaps and bounds of changes, and I hope that by the time my kids are older, they start changing the business of like the way that they're building houses, that the laws change. So thank you so much.
I hope so too. I think it will.
Thank you, Kristina. I normally say, I hope you enjoyed this interview, and I'm sure you did, because Kristina is a great storyteller and advocate for mold illness and making things be put into perspective. If you aren't well in your home, maybe there are some more serious measures that you have to take other than just getting on a protocol or buying a supplement. Long term, if you want your health back, there are sometimes drastic measures that we have to take. I hope that our podcast and our videos with these experts that really know a lot in this space gives you clues for healing. But if you've tried everything that all of these experts have done in diets, nutrition, exercise, and mindset, and you're still not healing enough, sometimes it means that maybe the home is what's making you sick, or the school, or your work. And there is nothing in life materialistically that matters than trying to improve your health. Without health, there is nothing that you can fight for. I hope that this conversation has given you things to think about. And even if you're not the one suffering from mold illness, if you know people living in a home or has been exposed to mold in homes and they're not well, I hope that you can share this message, so in the big picture, we can really get laws and advocacy to change. Okay, guys, make sure to eat a lot of meat, take care of your bodies and your homes, because it's the only place you have to live. I will talk to you later. Bye, guys.